Donald Trump has been typically entertaining on the stump, including in New Hampshire over the weekend. this riff on building an Iron Dome over the United States, a la Israel, some of his best work with full Michael Winslow sound effects. Take a listen.
And I will build an Iron Dome over our country, a state-of-the-art missile defense shield made in the USA. We do it for other countries. We help other countries. We don't do it for ourselves. We need it too. Reagan proposed that many years ago, Star Wars. He proposed it many, many years ago, but at that time there was no technology. It was just like it looked good. But we have unbelievable technology. We shoot them down. I've seen so many things. I've seen shots that you wouldn't even believe. Missile launched. They go, missile launched, and you hear a bell go. I mean, I see this. It's so incredible. And these guys, these geniuses, they go, these are not muscle guys here. They're muscle guys up here, right? And they calmly walk to a seat. Ding, 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 ding. They've only got 17 seconds to figure this whole thing out, right? Boom. Okay. Missile launch. Pshing, boom. It's the most and we don't have it here, but we help other countries in having it. No, we're going to have the greatest Iron Dome. Let's call it Iron Dome. Anywhere in the world. And it's going to be manufactured, a lot of it, right here in New Hampshire, actually. Come to think of it.
I think, he was watching airplane movies or watching his grandson play Space Invaders or something. I don't know. Yes. So, again, this is one of those instances where you say, Trump is directionally correct, but he's not necessarily the details guy.
He's
just
excited
sort of
about it.
Get it done. But, he's definitely whatever he witnessed really stuck with him. For more on Trump, because that guy you just heard is the bête noire of all of our bettors who were assembled in Davos for the World Economic Forum last week, as we discussed at some length and continue to. Kevin Roberts was one of those at Davos. And again, as we talked a little bit about his remarks yesterday with Jed Babin, I think, Javier Milei, just because it was such a Econ 101 Frederick Hayek lesson for the assembled globalists. But right there, just maybe just a half a step below Milei in terms of dressing down, a rhetorical dressing down to those in Davos was Kevin Roberts from the Heritage Foundation. Kevin, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Always glad to be with you, Dan and Amy. What a glorious and brilliant clip from President Trump. That
is yes.
It's a doozy.
Yeah. Hey, the Joint Chiefs of Staff meeting, wildly entertaining. I can only imagine. Anyway, you really took it to those in Davos who, parroting what you hear from Biden and company in this country, have great fear of a MAGA dictatorship and see themselves as the great vanguards for small d democracy. And you had something to say about that to them, which was nice.
Well, yes, I did have something to say to them. I was a little reluctant to go because I knew I would be outnumbered like 3,000 to 1, or I guess because President Milei was there 3,000 to 2.
Right.
But I went on behalf of the average American, right? And they absolutely abhor, the people at Davos, absolutely abhor not just President Trump, but any of us who deign to challenge their desire to continue to concentrate wealth and power. So I had a great time telling them the truth. I also had a great time watching a few of them just totally melt down in the audience because they can't handle the truth.
Yeah, well, and the truth that you gave them was wide ranging. I mean, it was top line, but wide ranging, covered a number of topics. Including their, all these great small L liberal, small D Democrats that like to defer the policymaking for the world to Chinese communists. You made mention of that, and of course the other feature topic always in Davos, at least in the last decade, is the climate apocalypse. And you had comments on both of those topics.
Right, and you think about Davos, it's hypocrisy layered on top of hypocrisy. And the two examples you just mentioned, Dan, China and their religion, which is climate change, actually go hand in hand as hypocrisies, as you know well. And in particular, what the point that I tried to drive home to them was, how is it that on the one hand you can tell us that climate change is happening and the world's going to end in the next 10 years, which you've been telling us, by the way, for the last 40. So that's one point. But how can you continue to tell us that on the one hand, but then on the other hand, invite the Chinese Communist Party, which initiates the greatest pollution in the world? They're basically not signatories to your revered Bible agreement, the Paris Agreement. And on top of their human rights abuses, you give them a platform at Davos. It tells me that maybe something else is your goal, and that something else that is their goal, Dan, is to take power away from America. Why do they want to do that? Because America is the icon for freedom and self-governance, and that's ultimately what they want to destroy.
Did you learn anything from your time there?
I learned that the World Economic Forum is as bad as you would expect, but that's about it.
Really, yeah.
Maybe worse.
Did you have time to?
Maybe worse.
Did you have time to, have a scotch with Klaus Schwab by chance, or no? Was he unavailable?
I would have sort of enjoyed that, because I would have enjoyed telling the man eyeball to eyeball what I thought, but I didn't run into him. I didn't spend a whole lot of time at the conference itself, because I didn't want any of that to seep into my DNA. But I did almost literally run into John Kerry as I was exiting on Thursday. Oh. And after Mr. Schwab, Mr. Kerry, of course, is considered like the hero of the World Economic Forum. So maybe another time, but not this time.
Yeah, I have to go back to at least the clips. The only speeches I watched in full, or remarks I watched in full, were yours and Milei's, but I saw clips of some of the others, Kerry's daughter. But this woman who founded a group called Stop Ecocide Now, who wants ecocide to be defined as a criminal action. So if you harm the environment, as she defines it, given thinking about the kind of statutory language she would include under the charge of ecocide, then you should be held accountable before a criminal court. I mean, potentially imprisoned. And she specifically mentions, people like farmers and fishermen are some of the worst offenders of ecocide. So you have serious people listening, allegedly serious people, but highly educated, wealthy, powerful. They're, part of the administrative states in all these Western countries, listening to somebody, and probably most of them nodding their heads, talking about locking up farmers and fishermen for ecocide. And apparently they're just completely oblivious to what we've seen in terms of revolts from farmers in places like the Netherlands, in places like Germany, what we saw in Canada. I mean, what you said, you just can't put enough exclamation points behind the idea of the disdain they have for people that they see as their lessers, the rabble.
No, it's so true, Dan, and it reminds me of Amy's good question about what did I learn? Well, I learned that they actually believe these things. I mean, the three of us can have this conversation. I'm sure most of your audience are saying, "Come on, the ecocide, they don't really believe this." Oh, they do, and when they say that, those of us who have children, those of us who like farmers, those of us, including myself, who like to fish,
like to eat,
we are all like to eat,
like meat.
Yeah. By the way, I should just say I celebrated my own abuse of ecocide by having a really big steak in Davos after.
Oh, good.
Nice.
But the real point is they want to end agriculture across the world. I mean, that came out of John Kerry's mouth, and obviously that hurts all of us. It particularly right now this year, as we're going into the spring, hurts farmers in places like Germany and the Netherlands and Ireland. And ultimately, to sum up here, that kind of agenda is coming here if the left continues to win elections in this country. That's not alarmism. And so America is, in fact, one of the last best hopes to stand up against Davos. And I guess ultimately I'm glad that I went, not just to read them the riot act, but to see firsthand that they really do believe this nonsense about things such as ecocide.
Well, when you were speaking, what was their reaction in the crowd? Like, what kind of facial expressions were they making?
A lot of crying.
Oh, Amy, it was glorious. They were, there were audible gasps. anytime I talk about climate change or China. And one guy, one European guy in some skinny jeans just had a total meltdown in the front row. It was glorious.
That was no European in skinny jeans. That was John Kerry, Kevin. So,
If only.
yeah. Any reflection on the migrant issue among the elites there? Anybody noticing what's happening in Western Europe and the Western world, and saying maybe the open borders paradigm is not the right one? Any conversations like that occur that you saw or heard?
Well, there were conversations, but they were all defensive. And I'm glad you asked that question for this reason. They are the organizers of the World Economic Forum are realizing that they've got to back up a little bit, for example, on their ESG agenda. They're not going to back up on the climate change alarmism, but they realize that the reaction to the environmental social governance stuff has been very successful, so they're backing up. I think they will eventually back up a little bit on their embrace of the Chinese Communist Party. But to your question, they do not understand the backlash that's occurring because of migration. I mean, I had some sidebar conversations with some of the attendees just to ask that question, and they simply don't understand, A, the scale of the problem just in terms of social cohesion and economics, but they don't understand the political cataclysm that is going to befall any political movement, including the British Conservatives, for not addressing the problem. And I mean, frankly, just to be really blunt here, there's going to be political hell to pay on these elites in the coming years. Unfortunately, it's going to be after all this damage is done from open borders.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's sort of like listening to people saying we should imprison farmers. I mean, so the protesting you see in the streets in places like Dublin, that has not made an impression on you. You think that's just a few right-wing extremists promoting white supremacy or something? I mean, is that what they think? That there's just like real regular people, our kind of people, have no concerns about this? I mean, are they able to read polling on this? I mean, it's not particularly obtuse how unpopular the open borders position is and how much chaos it's inflicted.
Well, it ought to be pretty simple to them, but in fact, they believe that they can ignore it, and they can count on their allies in the media to help them ignore it, to obscure that these protests are happening. And when the news sort of penetrates the consciousness of average people in places like Ireland and the UK, they then, to your point, Dan, portray the reactions of being by people who really are like knuckle draggers. I mean, they think that it's impossible for someone who's reacting to these open borders to actually be a rational, thinking, normal human being. That's one of the biggest disconnects that exist, and that, frankly, I saw firsthand in multiple conversations there.
Mm-hmm. One other point I thought was interesting. Emma Tucker, who's the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, in this roundtable about the media, essentially conceded that the legacy brands like her outlets, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, you know which ones they are, the legacy brands don't have the sort of control over information flow that they used to have. Now, she said this, wistfully. She's not ecstatic about it, but she's telling the truth regardless, even if it's a truth she's not happy to confront. So that's some good news coming out of there too. I mean, it's good news, bad news. They recognize they don't have that control, but it's control they seek. And this, and so the next stage is the social media companies, the tech oligarchs, colluding with these legacy brands to try to marginalize other information outlets. That would be my fear. What's yours?
Yeah, I think that's the precise fear, and they're even better at it. The tech oligarchs than are the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. So that ought to be really concerning. And I'll tell you a story of the week prior to going to Davos. I was meeting with a couple dozen House Republicans here in D.C. about the way forward on the border and some bills. This is all connected to what you said. And one of them said, well, Kevin, I'm a little less worried about the tech oligarchs. And this is a good guy. And I said, well, I'm not sure why you would say that, because as we sit here, you're running for re-election. and there are 99 times you're 99 times more likely to have a fundraising email sent into a spam filter because of the tech oligarchs than a Democrat colleague. And I said, this is just one example, obviously just in the political sphere. The rest of us out here in kind of the normal world encounter this just utter condescension, including by Emma Tucker of the Journal, that they want to control us. And therefore, to sum up here, even though the Journal and the Times see that their influence over us is waning, to your point, Dan, they are leaning on their friends, the tech oligarchs, to continue to control us. We as people, you think about solution, we have to be a lot more cognizant of what we consume, and that fracturing of where we get our news, while the powers that be lament it, ultimately we celebrate it. Y'all celebrate it with what you do. I celebrate it here at Heritage, and we have to do more of that. It's really important that we consume from outlets that don't hate us.
Kevin Roberts, President, Heritage Foundation. Kevin, thank you as always.
Thanks, Dan and Amy. Always a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Is your child getting the personalized attention they need to excel in math? Mathnasium has a solution for students of all skill levels. Each child's strengths and weaknesses, creating a customized learning plan. If you have kids in school, you're probably starting to see how they're doing in math. Could it be better? Consider an individual assessment with Mathnasium. They'll pinpoint what your child needs to excel, then give them live, face-to-face instruction, either in-center or online, so they can catch up and get ahead. At Mathnasium, math is taught in a way that makes sense to students, so they understand it, master it, and enjoy it. Over 1 million parents have already trusted Mathnasium to give their children an edge in math. The Mathnasium method gives them the critical thinking skills they need to thrive, with the option to attend face-to-face online sessions or come to one of our 1,000 neighborhood learning centers. Mathnasium is changing lives through math. Learn more at mathnasium.com. That's mathnasium.com.
All right. 45 years ago, Roy Spencer founded Permaseal Basement Systems, working out of his apartment in his F-150 pickup truck. Today, Permaseal has helped over 500,000 people in the greater Chicagoland area to make their homes healthier and more valuable. In the next few days, folks, it is going to rain, temperatures in the 40s. That means all that snow out there is going to melt, and the rain's going to keep coming down. I don't know if it could soak into the ground, but check your basements, check your sump pump and your backup sump pumps. And if you have